Dr. Krishnan, thank you so much for joining us on 60 Days, 60 Voices. This is an initiative that GAME and partners really have, we started 2 months ago at the onset of this whole crisis, in a sense to be able to voice support for small businesses, but also to be able to think in a forward-looking manner. What can we do? We know that this is a crisis, but what can we do beyond understanding the challenges? And I'm extremely excited to have you both. You're having been the former Secretary, Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, but more importantly, someone who's been a GAME well-wisher right from the get-go. So thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, thanks so much. Should we start off on the first set of issues right away?
Yes, sir. So my first question, sir, to you is
challenges.
Yes, sir. What are you seeing as the challenges for small businesses hit by COVID-19?
As I have been saying in other fora, I think what COVID has done in a sense is to bring into sharper focus and sharper relief some of the existing fault lines of our economy, our society. So I think broadly in keeping with that, MSMEs in India, and particularly the smaller of the MSMEs, the nano and the relatively more informal enterprises, have always had serious challenges. And COVID has made them even more vulnerable. COVID has essentially completely disrupted the economic system. So small entities find themselves cut off from both ends. Their demand, that is demand for what they produce, has gone into a tailspin, and their own ability to produce now, once the COVID situation, at least on the economic front, is easing, their ability to produce, that is their ability to supply, is also now limited. Now, unlike the bigger guys, these MSMEs also have relatively less ability to cope with these kinds of shocks. So all in all, I think they are in extremely sort of bad shape. They were not entities which had huge staying power. I think a hell of a lot of them, in fact, a large percentage of them, would be on the brink of closure today. That's my assessment, and that's the data that I'm sort of getting to see in all of what I read.
Thank you, sir. Sir, that leads me to my second question, sir. They say in times of crisis also lies opportunity.
Yeah.
Are you seeing that, sir? Of people innovating? Are you seeing if this is the time that India can almost rewrite its script in a sense?
Clearly, yes. There is I think, a desperate realization that business as usual is not going to work for at least a bulk of the MSMEs. And the innovation from the MSMEs has never been a problem. These are guys, these are entities whose DNA is innovation, because in the absence of that, they can't survive. I think what is required is innovation on the part of the public authorities that that interface with them. And there I see essentially 3 areas where I think there is tremendous scope for a disruptive break with the past. A restart, for the small entities to restart businesses, which means we have to handle some bit of the public health related side so as to enable them to restart activities. B, we have to handle the economic side of restart, which is to begin with, ease the financing constraint. But equally, I see a third element, which is the element of serious counseling, mentorship of these entities, because they don't understand what is going on. The world around them, in a sense, the world around all of us has collapsed. But you and I are, I think, relatively lucky. We have access to data, we have access to people, we have access to families, we have access to networks. But a bulk of these entities do not have that kind of access. So in addition to public health, in addition to finance, I think a serious initiative that needs to be sort of taken is reaching out to small enterprises, businesses in the form of counseling and mentoring to explain to them the new emerging world and how they reconstruct their lives.
That's very valuable, sir, and well said. What role and what recommendations would you have for the government, sir, as we talk about this new emerging life, as you said?
For governments, I think of the three things that I mentioned in the answer to the previous question, the restart part on the public health side is largely an initiative that the governments have to take. To illustrate, relatively the more formal, the more organized MSMEs are typically in industrial estates. Now, if industrial estates have to get back to serious reworking, then the workers will need to be assured that they are safe working and they are safe going back home. And that assurance of safety can only come from very directed public health initiatives, which only governments can take. So for instance, to take an illustration from Bangalore, let's say there is an industrial estate in Pina, create a dedicated sort of health related facility in Pina where you have to constantly test and assure fellow workers that you are not interacting with potential transmitters. And for instance, this brilliant seminar by a set of economists in Princeton has been making the point, more particularly Paul Romer, that if the economies have to restart, I, as a worker, need to be certain that my co-workers are not going to infect me. And I think ensuring that is going to be an important part of government's responsibility. Part two, the financing constraint to be eased will largely rest with government. So these two things I clearly see as important roles for governments.
Thank you, sir. And my last question, it kind of takes a little thread from what you mentioned earlier, that people like you and I are lucky in a sense. We have access to networks. And GAME, in a sense, is an alliance, a network of different partners. Do you see any particular role that an alliance can play in this time, sir?
Two is the third role that I outlined, namely the counseling, the mentoring, and getting them back to work and in complete terms with current reality, and putting them at ease and handling a lot of the social, emotional side, and then subsequently helping them with generating business models are the kind of things that an organization like GAME is well placed to do. And I think we should do more and more of these through local non-governmental bodies. And I think GAME can be a serious catalyst in this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I don't know if you can hear me. Thank you.